I'm ready. Sorry.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening and welcome. Welcome to tonight's episode of Teen Talk Live. I am your host, Ann Dillard. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm just so excited to be here with you tonight. And tonight we have a special guest. We have with us tonight DrCatherine Jackson, and she is going to involve us in this dynamic conversation. So, Dr. Jackson, welcome to Teen Talk Live.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Absolutely, so good to have you. And this is one of those topics that's kind of like the elephant in the room. But before we get into our topic, would you tell our audience a little bit about you and how do you serve?
I'm Dr. Catherine Jackson, Dr. J for short, and I'm known as America's #1 brain psychologist. And that's because I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and a board certified neurotherapist. And I serve people by doing traditional talk therapy in addition to neurotherapy here in Chicago, Illinois.
Oh, that is so wonderful. And we're going to have you back on to talk about the brain, even though our topic involves things that's happening in the brain, right? But specifically about the brain. And I'm so glad that you said yes to being our guest on Teen Talk Live. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yes. So, okay, so we are in this pandemic, right? And we are looking at the family structure, and we're talking about domestic violence and domestic abuse. But it didn't just start with the pandemic, right? It didn't just start with the pandemic, but as you know, we know as clinicians, or we don't even have to be clinicians, but as we know, definitely being sheltered in place with somebody who is your abuser or perpetrator or whatever label we put on it, it makes this experience so much more worse.
Yes,
So
it does.
talk to us about why is it important that we're having this dialogue today?
Because while, like you said, domestic violence did not start, or domestic abuse did not start with this pandemic, but it exacerbated by being stuck in the house with the person who hurts you or who tries to harm you in any kind of way. And it's not just physical, which is what most people think of. There are a bunch of different ways that domestic abuse occurs. And so if you don't have a place to escape your normal, like going to work, going to school, getting to talk to other people, and you're just trapped in the house with I guess like the terrorist who normally does harm to you, then that has a greater impact on your well-being overall, mental health, your physical health, everything. And there's no place to go because we can't go very far with this pandemic and being having a shelter in place.
Wow, I mean, I just get a visual image of that. And when we talk about the brain, you know, the fear that we get when we are in danger, it helps to prepare us to protect ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And so, and I'm gonna let you talk about this because you're the expert on this, but it releases those cortisol in our bloodstream to give us the energy to do what we need to do and to fight, flight, or freeze.
Yeah.
So it terrifies me to think about somebody who is now sheltered in place with somebody who terrorizes them and keep their brain in that loop.
Yes, it definitely throws off the structure of your brain, especially for younger developing brains. So let's say if domestic abuse is occurring in the family and it's really only happening to the mom, but if the children see it too, it's a traumatic experience. And so it changes the shape of the brain, and it changes the chemical functioning in the brain. And so if you can't get what you need when at a younger age, that's going to totally alter what you have to have by the time you're older. And so we want to try to protect the whole family, no matter who's getting abused per se. But often when you're in a situation like this, when you think about Christmas and other holidays is when domestic violence goes up. It's because that's when all the family is together. And so this is like an extended Christmas, extended Easter, extended
Mhm.
summer vacation, whichever way you want to look at it. And so when the domestic abuse is occurring and there's no place to go, your brain is never getting a break from this. It never gets healthy interaction. It's just getting all of the negative interaction, and you're being
Wow.
stuck.
Right, right. And so you're being stuck in a place where it seems like there is no hope or there's no help, right?
Yeah.
Usually there's a release that comes when somebody is able to come and rescue you and somebody's able to come and help you. But
Mm-hmm.
with this uncertainty of what's going on, no school, no reprieve to go to work, no reprieve to go, visit somebody down the street or however you're used to conducting your normal life, then again, it's like a hamster on a wheel. It doesn't end.
Yeah, it does not end. And then if you already had like an impacted mood or increase in anxiety as a result of the domestic abuse that was going on already, just think about how much more impacted and how much more thrown off your mood and your emotions are when you're stuck in the house all the time. You're always on alert, and that's not a good way for your brain to be or your body. Is when you talked about the cortisol, our body, like you said, is conditioned to either fight, flight, or freeze in an event. But when cortisol levels remain way too high, then now we're threatened to have other things happen, physical conditions and serious or severe mental health issues. And it just gets worse and worse. And so this is a hard time for anybody who has to go through domestic violence.
That is so sad because it's really compounded the grief and the loss that's happening during this time because we see those who were losing physically to death. And it's hard to conceptualize those who were losing emotionally, right? Because of all of this and somebody one of our colleagues said it so great. I don't know if I can repeat it exactly how she said it, but she's like, we're celebrating the first responders now, which is a great thing, and we're going to have to celebrate the first responders who are the mental health professionals who are going to have to step in afterwards. We're like the second row of first responders
Yeah,
because there's so much damage that's being done right now.
it's a lot of damage being done. And I think even uh, it's worse for people who are going through domestic violence. But even people who normally are having an easy time in life, this is exacerbating things. This is pushing us all to limits and challenging all of us at this time
Right.
because nobody was prepared for anything like this.
Wow. Well, I certainly I'm going to take a spin to this conversation because I want to talk about something that we normally don't talk about. But let me welcome all our guests. Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining. If you are here with us, just drop a comment. Let Dr. J and I know that you are listening to us. If you have questions, please just let us know. Drop your questions in the comment because this is a really important dialogue for us to have at this time. So, Dr. J, here is Monique Long says, "Hey, Dr. J," and Sherilyn Campbell says, "Hey," and Chima is here, Martika is here. I'm so glad that you all are here watching us. Thank you for joining. So, Dr. J, here's the part that concerns me.
Mhm.
We a lot of times and me working with survivors of domestic abuse and with a domestic abuse agency in Atlanta, a lot of times what we do, all our resources and things are geared towards the victim or survivor. And we already established we don't necessarily like to say victim, right?
Mm-hmm.
The person who's being abused or who is the target of the abuse, right? So a lot of times our resources are targeted to that person. And that doesn't do anything to help change the behavior of the perpetrator. Right. So let's talk a little bit about that. What if you are a let's say a dad, because that's typical, right? But even though women are
Mm-hmm.
also abusers, right? Let's say that. What if you are a dad and you're just so overwhelmed and this is something that you really and truly don't want to do? But because you don't have the skills, you lack the self-control and all that kind of stuff, you find yourself back in this place over and over again.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that, how can we help?
Well, if you are a dad or any abuser,
Right.
male, no matter what the gender is, and you desire not to do it, like you actually feel bad, remorseful after you kind of go on a tirade, you're already steps ahead, because that's where a lot of the abuse usually when it takes place. People are not remorseful. They feel privileged and entitled to be able to abuse. They think it's their right to be able to control other people. And so if you are already wanting to change the behavior, you're already steps ahead, because that's one of the steps, is to really want to take responsibility, to want to change. You have to have a sincere desire to change if you want to change something here, or you want to be different and handle your anger or your frustration in a different way. I say if somebody is the abuser, they want to assess how they relate with other people, especially in their home. These are their loved ones. And a lot of times, for anybody who really doesn't want to be doing that kind of behavior, then they have to ask themselves a series of different questions of, how do I make other people feel? When they do something, how does that make me feel? When I get frustrated, how do I handle my anger? And then paying attention to the reactions of everyone else. Are they walking on eggshells around you? Are they fearful? Is it hard for them to ever express their opinions or what they think and feel because they fear a reaction from you? And so if somebody's already in that place that you said, if they can ask themselves those questions and be honest with those answers, I think they would know that they need help.
I think you're so spot on with that. And it's so important if they can, truly assess themselves. And if more than one person is telling you that you're being a bully, chances are you are being a bully. And so you need to get some help, right? But I
Mm-hmm.
think, Dr. J, I think I want to back up just a little bit, because a lot of times when we talk about domestic abuse or we talk about domestic violence, we have a tendency to think that it's just physical, right? And then here is another thing. We have a tendency to think that it's just intimate partner violence that we're talking about.
No.
So can you help us dispel those myths?
Okay. It is not just intimate partners. So it's not just for married people or people who are in a dating relationship. But it usually does occur with people who live in close proximity. So people who live in the same home. That can happen among siblings. Sometimes they call some of these by different names. So like if a parent starts off hitting the other parent, and then they go to hitting the child too, or the children too, of course, then that comes under the name of child abuse. But that still falls under the big umbrella of domestic violence. And the same is true if you have elders living in the home and somebody is abusing the elder. And like you said, it's not just hitting. It can be emotional abuse. It can come in the form of just control or intimidation. Other abuse is economic or emotional, so you can't even see it, but somebody's
Right.
saying different things to the person to make them feel bad about themselves, to lower their self-esteem, and to just impact how they move about, like second guessing themselves all the time. So impacting how they move about in their daily lives. So financial
Yes.
stalking and cyber stalking is a part of domestic abuse that people don't think about. So you
Right.
broke up with somebody, or you no longer want to talk to somebody, even if it's a family member, a sibling, and they keep coming to your page with a lot of just mess all the time. That's cyber stalking. So, and that causes a lot of emotional angst for people. So there's so many different forms of domestic abuse.
And I think it's important that people know that, because it's any situation where somebody is exerting power and control over you. And it's so important that people know that domestic abuse is not about what you did wrong as an individual, what you said wrong, or how you didn't, clean the house or keep the kids quiet. It's not about that. It's about somebody's lack of power and control, and then they try to exert what little they feel they have over you.
Yeah. And it's sad, some of the domestic violence is actually done in what people feel like is in love. And they think they're doing what's best for you, as if you don't know what's best for yourself.
Yeah.
And you got to really pay attention. Sometimes, especially in the beginning of relationships, it may seem like that's the right thing to do, that it just feels like this person loves you. And when
Right.
you think
Right.
about domestic violence in the form of kids, they don't know. They're forming all of their habits based off their interactions with their parents. So they think this is what love looks like. And then later you learn that this is not love at all, that the person
Yeah.
was just to control you.
That's right. That's right. And so again, shout out to people who are watching. Thank you, Gloria, for joining. Dr. Rael, thank you for joining. I think that's a mutual friend. My business bestie Marquita is here. And so thank you for everybody who's joining. And this is such a critical conversation to have at such a time like this about domestic abuse. The other thing about it too, Dr. J, is really thinking about people who are being abused and are feeling trapped right now, because a lot of the shelters are not accepting people because of their protection, right, against COVID-19. A lot of shelters are not accepting people, but your safety is still first and
It is.
foremost.
It is. And I don't know. It's hard to have a full plan, period, and to get family members to create a plan for safety purposes. And it's especially harder right now to have that plan, because most people are not allowing anybody else into their homes either for safety. But if you talk through a plan with somebody who loves you and they know that you're sheltering in place and you're not going in and out, they may be willing to take you in if you need to flee at some point. And so that's part of a good safety plan for anybody. And you want to have everything already set, grab and go, so you can get out of there at a time that you can sneak away, like maybe when the abuser is asleep.
And I think you made a really key point. And in order for you to come up with this plan, you have to first tell somebody what's going on.
Yeah. This is not the time to isolate yourself.
Right?
You have to let one trusted person know. I say if you have a circle of support, that's even better. So you have more than one person, but sometimes we don't. Sometimes we
Yes.
don't. So if you just have that one person, you can do things like come up with a code word so they know to come by and bring resources over or something, like some food or some masks, just to make sure that you're safe, because a lot of abusers will not abuse with other people around. They usually
Absolutely.
closed doors. So even if that person comes over and that stops the abuse for a while, that's a good thing. And maybe they get distracted and maybe they don't return back to abusing in any way, whether it's verbal, it's emotional, it's physical, no matter what it is, sexual,
Yes.
whatever abuse. Yeah.
Yes. Abusers thrive on isolation
Mhm.
and count on their uh the person who they're inflicting that abuse on being being secretive and not telling anybody about it. But what if you are a teen and your parent or a parent or somebody in your house is being abused? How do we help the teens in that situation? Because a lot of times the teens have a tendency to get in the middle of it. You know, I used to have some of my girls, they would literally get arrested because they would get in fist fight with the parent who is not who's abusing the other one.
Ooh, now that is a hard one because the teens don't have as much control over what happens and not as much say. But oftentimes, teens talk to other teens,
That's right.
and they have trusted friends that they know too. And the thing about when something big is happening, teens don't keep it. They won't keep it either. They'll tell their parents. So even if a teen can get a message to one of their friends and then
Yes.
get somebody else involved, again, because abusers don't want to have a big brawl in front of a bunch of people. They thrive on the isolation, and isolation is a form of domestic violence.
Right.
And if the teen could tell somebody else, and then that person tells an adult, and they can come over and intervene. Sometimes that's the one of the best ways that they can help. I don't blame kids who jump in, but it's not the best way. But I totally understand why they
Yeah.
do it.
It's hard. It's hard. And, you know, I typically would tell my teens, you know, get the other kids and put them in a safe place. Make sure you all are in a safe place. But, you know, with social media and everything, this is the time, as embarrassing as it might be, this might be the time to pull out your phone and record it.
I was thinking that after I finished. I said I saw an episode of Greenleaf a long time ago.
Oh,
Guy, one of the girls was dating a guy who was a big time singer or something, and he was doing that whole thing. And she
yes.
pulled said, "I'm recording you," and that was the only way she could get out the house.
That's
And
it.
that
I think it was Zora, right?
was
Uh,
her.
right. And she's like, I'm recording you.
He backed off because when you have an audience, I feel like abusers are more cowards. They will do it behind closed doors. When they have an audience, they will try to be a model citizen.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think as we talk about, you know, providing resources and tips for the abuser as well, you know, if you need to call the domestic abuse hotline yourself to get some help for yourself, you know, and it might be that you also reach out to a therapist to get some coping skills. If you feel like, you know, you're on the verge of doing something that's not what you want to do, leave, go for a walk, do
Yeah,
something,
yeah.
because it's this is not a pretty time.
This is not a pretty time. That's, in fact, one of the tips that I had for both um, people who are targets of abuse and people who do the abusing is to walk away. Just go someplace else, getting out. Being in our homes right now feels pretty small, and being in the home with somebody who abuses you makes the space feel even smaller. So you want to make that space feel even bigger by trying to go outside into your yard or on your balcony, your patio, or walk around the neighborhood. That gives you a break and gives your brain a break from some of the abuse, verbally, physically, whatever type of abuse that you get. And you can get a little bit of a break, and that is a great time where targets of abuse, or I hate the word victims, but victims of domestic
Right.
violence, they can actually contact family, let them know they're okay, or if they need some help and some support. And if the abuser goes away, that just gives you a nice break from it. Hopefully they love the walk and stay out for a while.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm so glad that again that we're having this conversation. And also a part of abuse that we don't really talk about is, sometimes if you are a member of a church and you are the abuser or you are being abused, reach out to your pastor, reach out to somebody to
Mhm.
get some help, because that's a population that also endures abuse and it's not necessarily talked about.
It's not. It's
it,
not.
it's not, and this is not the time to keep the family secret.
It's not. This is not the time. And it feels like as the world, a lot of people are losing their lives in this whole situation. But for those who are staying healthy and things are going along fine, it feels like the whole world is having a reset. So this is a great time to reset and change some of these negative behaviors as well, for those abusers who desire to have a change.
That is
No,
so important. And I know we're at the end of our 30 minutes. It seems like it goes by so fast. So fast. But Dr. J, can you, what are a couple of tips or just some important points that you want to stress to our audience as we talk about this topic? And I know we can't cover the whole gamut in just 30 minutes, right? So then we'll leave your contact information and my contact information for people who need more information. But what do you want? What are some key things that you want our viewers to get out of this broadcast?
I'm going to give a key for people who are targets of abuse, and then something key for people who are abusers.
Okay.
And the key thing for people who are targets of abuse is to stay connected to other people, no matter how much the abuser is trying to push them away and isolate them. You should stay connected to somebody and to reach out to either local or the national domestic violence hotline. It's literally called the National Domestic Violence Hotline, and they can
Yeah.
get you connected with local domestic violence shelters or domestic violence places where you can get counseling and support and resources. So that's for the people who are targets of abuse. For those who are the abusers, like I said earlier, first they have to assess and be willing to make a change. They have to want to make a change and take responsibility. You can no longer blame other people for your actions, for you getting upset, for you lashing out and hitting or calling names or taking advantage,
Withholding money, right? Withholding money.
taking
That's,
advantage. But anyway, yes, you can no longer
yes,
blame somebody else for that. And so, if you really want to get better while we're going through this whole shelter in place order and everybody is quarantining, there are things that you can do, and change can happen if you really want change to happen. And so if you do things like practicing, I saw your video, deep breathing recently. If
yes,
they practice deep breathing on a regular basis, that will calm their brain and calm the nervous system so that even when they get upset, they're not getting upset to the height. So practicing deep breathing or meditating, and also reaching out for help. They can reach out for help at a domestic violence center too. Often they serve and have programs for the abusers. And the best course of action for this is a domestic abuse program. You have to go through one
yes,
that is specific to that. You can also get traditional therapy to process anything that may have happened that came up to what led to learning, because this is a learned behavior. This is
yes, it
not
is.
something we're born with. We learn
Yes.
to be abusers. And so you can get to the bottom of what message you learned and why you felt like this was the right way to handle yourself and to behave. And then start to learn coping skills and different mechanisms to undo that.
Yes, and I think it's so critical that again that we have this conversation and that we talk to the person who is also the abuser, because the reality is, as a person who works with domestic abuse program, the reality is when a person is removed from that situation, a lot of times they find themselves back in that relationship,
Yeah.
right? And so we have to talk about how can change happen. And
Yeah.
domestic abuse is not it's not a marriage problem, it's not a relational problem, it's a person individual problem.
And
Right?
it's a lost behavior that has to be unlearned. It has to be.
Absolutely. Absolutely, absolutely. So again, if you are a person in this situation, or if you are a perpetrator or an abuser, there is help for you, and you don't have to make this quarantine time of sheltering in place worse for the members of your household. You just don't. There is help out there.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. J, I thank you so much for your time, and we are over a little bit, so I appreciate it. But would you tell people what's coming up for you and how they can reach you?
Thank you so much for having me. Before I say all that, I have two things coming up. I am launching my own private practice soon.
Yay.
By the end of April, it might be the beginning of May. We have to see. And I'm also finishing up and launching a book in the summer about mental health. So for everybody who needs mental health, you don't know where to find it, you need help, this book will answer all of your questions. So,
Oh, that
and
is so exciting.
yes, and you can find me online at drccj.com, and soon at DrCatherine Jackson, which is just my name, .com.
That is so exciting. Congratulations on opening up your practice, and just kudos and all the best with that. And again, for people who have joined us, thank you, Laverne, for joining. Carolyn, um, thank you for joining. Carla, thank you for joining all the way from Florida. Um, Everybody who's watching, Farah from Chicago, thank you for joining. So we've got quite the crew out here supporting us tonight on this topic. So as you join, please share this information out. Share this information out. And if you are listening to us and you have tips, drop it in the comment section as well. And we'll go in the comment section and drop our contact information. Thank you again for joining this episode of Teen Talk Live. We are so serious about impacting the entire family and changing the lives and minds of teens and those who love them. Have a good night, everyone.